Fantasy Source Football Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with George Winkler, and today we're talking about the mighty NFC East.
Yes, we are. Preseason is almost over, but for you guys still drafting this weekend, we're here for you. We're here to talk about the NFC East, and we got to start out with the Dream Team, right?
Yeah, I mean, and keep in mind, we're also going to be dropping a little bit of a sneak preview into the mock draft that the Fantasy Source experts just had yesterday. It's not quite, it'll be posted up on the site very shortly if it isn't already by the time you listen to this. Some big surprises and some things that were very different from other mock drafts I've seen throughout the blogosphere, the internet, whatever, primarily starting with Michael Vick.
Of course, the lightning rod of controversy that is Michael Vick. He lasted until the second round, and I was one of the guys who passed on him.
Mid-second round.
I passed on him. I had the, I had the 7th pick, so coming back, I passed on Michael Vick in the second round for Greg Jennings, and it's a 3-wide receiver league, so that was the strategy I was thinking there, that the wide receivers were more at a premium, but even I was kind of surprised at how far Vick fell.
Yeah, I think that Vick falling to 20th overall in our mock draft, and I may be wrong about that, but I seem to remember it was number 20 exactly, indicates that at least in our group of people, we think that quarterback is a pretty deep position and that there are probably 7-8 quarterbacks that are going to all be very good. Yes, there are differences between Aaron Rodgers and Matt Schaub, but the difference between those guys isn't as big as the difference between, say, the top-end wide receivers and then the bottom-end wide receivers, and definitely not as big as the running backs, because we went through those guys before we started getting into the quarterbacks. We even had Phillip Rivers getting drafted ahead of Vick.
Yeah, I don't think that I agree with that because Vick gives you the running on top of the passing. But yeah, the quarterbacks got passed on. It was like everybody had the same strategy of going running back first, wide receiver second, and then they decided running back or wide receiver in the third. I passed on Vick. I ended up with a player who's a little bit like Vick as my quarterback, Josh Freeman in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a standard strategy that we've been seeing a lot of people start to advocate, which is if you don't get one of those 7-8 quarterbacks that are great, you know what? Let it go. You may as well wait and pick up all your backups and your running backs and things like that, or even just wait till the 8th, 9th round, once you've filled in your starting lineup and maybe even a backup or two or running back. But among the starters on Philadelphia that did get drafted very early, I wrote the preview for the Philadelphia Eagles, and as I said in that preview on Fantasy Source Now, every single position on the Eagles has a fantasy relevant, if not starter. Brent Selleck is the only one who's not a starter, clear-cut starter. What do you think is in store for LaShawn McCoy this year? Deshaun Jackson, those two guys kind of interesting in what they did last year. McCoy didn't have a huge rushing total, and Jackson only caught 47 passes.
Yeah, LaShawn McCoy is who I ended up with at number 7. I was planning on taking Mendenhall because he's a little bit more consistent from week to week, but McCoy's very good. He gives you a lot in the passing game, and he should score a lot of touchdowns, granted that Vick stays healthy for the whole season. You asked about Deshaun Jackson. It looks like he's coming off the board in the 3rd round. A big play guy, a little less value in PPR leagues, but still very hard for defenses to cover, and I think he'll have a good season with Vick. One of the big questions coming into this season was with Jeremy Maclin and his sickness and where exactly to take him. And it turns out that he's actually been a value in some of the drafts because if he performs up to his previous levels, then, if you get Jeremy Maclin in, say, the 5th, 6th round, you're doing pretty good, I think.
Yeah, I mean, as a wide receiver, too, that's perfectly fine. And you know what? Like you say, I think he could be easy value there if you're going to be waiting that long. Moving to another team in the NFC East that's probably getting a lot of dark horse buzz as potential sneaky division winner even, the Dallas Cowboys. When was the last time we heard of the Dallas Cowboys not being the favorite but somehow being sneaky? Tony Romo coming back from injury is a big part of that, but also I think there are big expectations for Dez Bryant.
Yeah, speaking of sneaky, Felix Jones and Dez Bryant are those guys that you're hoping to take in a little bit later on, maybe the 4th round. and you're hoping that they can give you second-round value because they have that breakout potential. Felix Jones says goodbye to Marion Barber, who's now with Chicago. It's his to lose right now, and can he hold up to more than 15, 20 carries a game? I think we're going to finally find that out this year.
Well, what do you see? What do you see for Bryant, though?
Well, with Bryant, he still has to compete with Austin. I think Austin gets a lot of the throws over the middle from Romo. Same with Witten. But Bryant is their big play down the field threat, and he could be along the lines of a Deshaun Jackson too.
I mean, again, we talked about the Eagles having guys at every skill position being fantasy relevant, if not a starter. People forget. I think they're forgetting that the Cowboys have that too, and that you can't ignore what's going on in Dallas with those guys, especially from a fantasy perspective. What about the New York Giants? Now, historically, they've been a run-heavy team, and Eli Manning is on the borderline of fantasy starter, in and out of that 10 to 15 range among top fantasy quarterbacks. Do you see any kind of change this year, or is it more of the same?
Well, I think with Eli, he's that guy that, like we talked about, if you wait on a quarterback, well, you might want to take two quarterbacks later on, maybe in the 7th, 8th round. And Eli's one of those guys that falls in that category. It's all about cutting down the turnovers with him. He has the ability to throw for 4,000 yards, but if he's going to undo that with 20, 25 turnovers, then it's kind of dicey, and you'll want another option to kind of play the matchups and hedge your bets for when Eli might be, facing a good defense like the Eagles, and you won't want to mess with him with the turnovers. But the interesting thing with the Giants for me is with their wide receivers. Hakeem Nicks is kind of filling that role that Plaxico Burress used to. He's a good red zone target with the bonus that he's better than Burress at work in the middle of the field too. And then, his partner is Mario Manningham, who should see a boost now that Steve Smith is in Philadelphia. So I like the Giants receivers. I like Nicks in the 2nd round. I like Manningham, as a value pick, a sneaky pick you can get as a number 2.
There are some clear-cut roles there for those guys. As far as the running game with Bradshaw and Brandon Jacobs, it's been they've had some sort of subtle dynamic changes over the years. I feel like, it may not have been reality, but I feel like Brandon Jacobs used to be the clear-cut one guy, and then Bradshaw became the change of pace, and then that slowly kind of changed in a glacial pace over time. How do you see that dynamic working this year?
This is one of the more interesting dynamics in all of the NFL because you do not have clear-cut roles. You would think Brandon Jacobs is the big goal line back, and he will see a lot of those carries, but Ahmad Bradshaw has proven he's good in the goal line too. So I still think Bradshaw is your lead guy because he's going to give you some catches out of the backfield, so that's going to add to his yardage total. In a PPR league, I could see Bradshaw going as high as the early 2nd round. I passed on him in actually the 3rd round of our draft, which is non-PPR, for LeGarrette Blount. I thought Blount would get all the work to himself in Tampa Bay, and that was my reasoning. But that was a very difficult decision at that point.
Let's move to the final team in the NFC East, and for their rabid fan base, it must be very painful to be watching preseason so far. No matter what you say about how well John Beck and Rex Grossman have played at quarterback, there's no faith that they're going to be able to perform at an adequate level in the NFL during the regular season, and I think that there's a feeling that all of that is going to have a domino effect on the rest of the offense. Yeah,
there's really no reason to mess with the Redskins quarterback situation unless you're in a 2-quarterback league where, you'll be keeping your eye on the starter, of course. But yeah, whoever is the quarterback is going to have a big effect on Santana Moss and Chris Cooley. And we've seen them drop in drafts to the point to where, maybe they could be values because we've seen these veterans do it before. And maybe if one of these quarterbacks can just show a semblance of anything, these guys might be able to turn out to be decent bye-week fillers or a little bit more.
Pretty much the only guy on the Redskins I've seen get a little bit of buzz is Tim Hightower, running back, who seems to have wrested control of the starting running back job away from Ryan Terrain. But as I understand it, it's not exactly a clear-cut thing. And to remember, Mike Shanahan. He was in Denver for all those years and had no problem switching to the next guy.
Yeah, Mike Shanahan is like that. He has just been messing with fantasy owners.
Oh,
it seems
remember
like
Tatum
for
Bell?
years.
Remember Tatum Bell?
Remember Reuben Jones?
Oh my goodness!
I mean,
Nightmares.
Look at these guys. But from the non-draft perspective, Mike Shanahan is a wellspring of pickups for fantasy owners during the season. So Tim Hightower is going to start out getting the bulk of the carries. Ryan Terrain has an injured hand. But I don't see Tim Hightower being your long-term solution. I mean, if I had to bet on a guy in this backfield, it would be Roy Halu.
Oh, so if you're talking about, we've now named 3 running backs, and I do love Halu out of Nebraska. I mean, a great real-life draft pick in the mid-rounds that the Redskins made. If you're going to be drafting for each of these guys in the fantasy draft, where would you look to draft each of them?
Well, I would look to draft Hightower as your number 3 back. Terrain might fit in as a 4, Halu maybe a 4 or a 5. But I really like I said, if I had to make one bet on a guy, I just from seeing him limited in preseason, I like what I've seen from Halu, and Mike Shanahan's done it before, so he could do it again. So look for that midseason pickup or stash him on your roster and have him ready to go.
Faith in Mike Shanahan running backs springs eternal.
Springs eternal at the end of preseason.
All right, George, thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you.